John was 55 years old. He was sitting alone in his old pickup truck, parked outside a convenience store on the edge of town. It had just stopped raining. Drops of water still clung to the windshield, reflecting the pale yellow light from the store in front of him. John's truck was not impressive. The paint had faded. There was a small tear in the driver's seat that he had patched with duct tape. On cold winter mornings, the engine made a sound loud enough to make strangers turn their heads. But John was never embarrassed by it. He turned off the engine, sat quietly for a few seconds, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a brown leather wallet. It was so worn that it had almost lost its original shape. The corners had been rubbed smooth. The stitching on one side had started to come apart. The leather was so faded that most people would assume its owner was struggling financially. They would be wrong. John could afford any wallet he wanted. He had more money in his accounts than many of the people driving luxury cars past him. He owned several properties. He had investments that produced steady income. He had enough savings to live for years without working. And more importantly, he no longer woke up every morning afraid that one unexpected bill could destroy his life. But the most valuable thing in that wallet was not cash. It was not a credit card. It was not a premium bank card. And it was not a document proving how much he owned. John opened the wallet. Inside was an old library card and a small receipt, folded into 4 parts. Most of the ink had faded. Some of the words were almost impossible to read. But John had carried that receipt for 27 years. Why would a man with so much wealth treat an old piece of paper as if it were priceless? The answer began when John was 22. At 22, John lived in a rented room so small that if he stood in the middle of it, he could almost touch everything. An old bill, a shocky wooden desk, a mini refrigerator that made noise all night, and a clothes rack holding a few outfits he had worn for years. One evening, John was lying on his bed, scrolling through his phone before going to sleep. An advertisement appeared. It was for a jacket. It looked good. At least it looked good on the model in the picture. Underneath it, large letters said, 70% off today only. A red countdown clock kept running. 10 minutes, 9 minutes and 59 seconds. 9 minutes and 58 seconds. Every second made John feel as if he were losing an important opportunity. He opened his wallet. There were exactly $4 inside. He checked his bank account. The balance was not much better. John already owned 2 jackets. One was still perfectly fine. The other was old but could easily last a few more years. He did not need another one. But he started creating reasons to buy it. I work hard. I deserve to reward myself. The original price is much higher. If I do not buy it today, I will regret it. I will look more professional wearing this. That is how many bad financial decisions begin. Not with need, but with a story we tell ourselves to justify desire. John tapped the buy button. There was not enough money in his account. The website immediately offered an installment plan. He only needed to pay a small amount today. The rest could be paid over the next few months. It looked harmless, but John did not yet understand that every time he financed something unnecessary, he was making a deal with his future self. John today got the new jacket, but John next month had to work to pay for it. John next month might be exhausted. He might face an emergency. He might need that money for something important, but he would have no choice, because John today had already spent it for him. Many young people are doing exactly the same thing. Their bank accounts are empty, but their clothes must make them look wealthy. They own no real assets, but their phones, shoes, and cars must make them look successful. They are not buying products. They are buying approval. They are paying for compliments. They are borrowing from the future to decorate the present. John did not buy the jacket that night, not because he suddenly understood all of this, but because the transaction was declined. Years later, he still remembered the shame he felt when the red words appeared on the screen. Payment unsuccessful. At the time, John thought his problem was that he did not have enough money. Later, he realized the real problem was that he did not have enough self-control. By the time John was 25, he had a more stable job. His income was slightly better, but his finances were still a mess. Every time he stopped at a gas station, he put exactly $10 into the tank. He never filled it completely. Not because this saved money, but because John did not want to see the real cost. If he paid $10, it felt like a small expense. If he filled the tank and saw $50 or $60 on the screen, he would have to face the truth that his cost of living was becoming difficult to control. So he divided the problem into smaller pieces. $10 today, $10 a few days later, then another $10 after that. John was not reducing the expense. He was only making it harder to see. Many people live this way. They do not want to open their banking app. They do not want to add up their debt. They do not want to look at their credit card statement. They do not want to know how much they truly spend every month. Because once they see the real number, they are forced to admit that something is wrong. John was willing to drive across town to save $2 on gas. He would spend nearly 40 minutes getting there and back. He used more fuel. He wasted time. He added stress. But at the same time, several monthly subscriptions kept quietly draining his account. A fitness app he never used. A streaming service whose password he had forgotten. A software subscription that started after a free trial. Each charge was only $7 or $9. Individually, they seemed insignificant. But over a year, they added up to a serious amount of money. John was willing to spend 40 minutes saving $2, but he would not spend 10 minutes canceling subscriptions that took money from him every month. That is one of the great contradictions of personal finance. People negotiate over a tiny amount at the grocery store, but they sign a multi-year car loan without reading the details. They save a few dollars on food, but ignore high credit card interest. They obsess over drops of water while a large hole is sinking their financial boat. One day, John received a notification from his bank. His credit limit had increased. His credit score had also gone up. John felt proud. He took a screenshot and sent it to a friend. He thought it meant he was making progress. But John did not yet understand that a higher credit limit did not mean he was wealthy. It only meant a lender believed he could carry more debt. A credit score did not show how many assets he owned. It mainly showed how consistently he borrowed and repaid money. A person with excellent credit could still have no emergency savings. A person allowed to borrow tens of thousands of dollars could still have a net worth of zero. Do not confuse the ability to borrow more with becoming wealthier. Do not confuse the entrance to a larger prison with freedom. When John was 28, his car suddenly broke down on the way to work. He called a tow truck. The mechanic inspected the vehicle for nearly an hour and gave him the number. $1,400. John stood still. He did not have that kind of money available. But if he did not repair the car, he could not get to work. If he could not get to work, he would lose income. If he lost income, rent would be late. Bills would pile up. And within a few weeks, the fragile life he had built could begin to collapse. John opened his phone. There were more than 200 contacts. He used to believe he had many friends. He had people to drink with, people to watch games with, people who commented on his social media posts, people who had once slapped him on the back and said, "If you ever need anything, call me." That day, John started calling. The first person did not answer. The second said he was in a meeting. The third asked why John did not just use a credit card. The fourth said he was struggling too. The fifth promised to call back. That call never came. Some people read his message and ignored it. Some asked so many questions that John felt as if he had to prove he deserved help. Some gave 10 minutes of advice but offered no real support. After dozens of calls, only 4 people truly answered and spoke with him, and only one person was willing to help. His name was Owen. Owen did not ask where John had wasted his money. He did not laugh at him. He did not lecture him. He did not list all the poor decisions John had made. He stayed silent for a few seconds and then asked, "When do you need it?" John said he needed the money that day. Owen replied, "I will meet you after work." That afternoon, Owen gave John $1,400. John wrote a receipt, clearly stating the amount and the repayment date. Owen looked at the paper and smiled. He said, "I trust you. But if this paper makes you feel better, keep a copy." John repaid every dollar over the following months, but he never threw away the receipt. He folded it and placed it in his wallet. Because that day, John learned something no finance book had ever taught him. You can have 200 people in your contacts. You can have thousands of followers. You can have plenty of likes under a photo. But when real life happens, those numbers become very small, very quickly. A network is not measured by how many people know your name. It is measured by how many people answer when you have nothing left to show, no success to display, no party to attend, no benefit to exchange, just a human being in trouble who needs help. That same year, John began to understand the limits of trading time for money. He accepted extra shifts. He worked weekends. He stayed late. John believed that if he simply worked more hours, every problem would eventually disappear. But the more he worked, the more exhausted he became. The more tired he was, the less time he had to cook. He bought more takeout. He drank more coffee. He spent more money recovering from work. Some weeks, John worked nearly 20 extra hours, but after taxes, transportation, food, and other costs, the amount he actually kept was far less than he expected. That was when John understood hard work matters. But hard work in the wrong direction only turns you into an exhausted person with a little more money. If you spend your entire life selling hours for income, your earning power will always be limited by something no one can buy more of: time. Every person gets 24 hours a day. No one is wealthy enough to purchase hour number 25. At 31, John bought a professional tool set that cost $1,200. He told himself he needed it for work. And it was useful, but deep down, John knew that was not the whole truth. He liked the feeling of people seeing him own expensive equipment. He wanted coworkers to think he was skilled. He wanted clients to believe he was successful. He wanted the tools to speak for the confidence he still did not have. Some things are not purchased for their practical use. They are purchased to send a message. Look at me. I am doing well. I belong with successful people. But expensive tools do not turn an inexperienced person into an expert. An expensive camera does not automatically create a great photograph. A luxury car does not turn the driver into a wealthy person. And a $1,200 tool set cannot replace skill, judgment, and problem-solving ability. At the same time, John was working close to 60 hours a week. He was always busy. His phone was always ringing. His schedule was packed. Every day, John felt as if he had pushed himself to the limit. But one evening, he sat down and wrote out everything he had done that week. He discovered an uncomfortable truth. Out of nearly 60 hours of work, only about 2 hours had directly created meaningful results. The rest had been spent traveling, waiting, fixing mistakes, searching for lost tools, replying to unnecessary messages, sitting through meetings that produced no, handling tasks that looked urgent but created little value. John realized he had been using busyness as a blanket to hide poor priorities. Busyness is a feeling. Effectiveness is a result. Many people work 12 hours a day but cannot identify the 2 hours that matter most. They reply to hundreds of messages but never complete the task that produces income. They watch dozens of tutorials but never finish one product. They move from course to course without ever executing one plan all the way through. They run very fast, but they are running in circles. Then they wonder why they are exhausted while their life remains unchanged. John started changing the way he worked. Every morning, he chose the single most important task. Not the easiest task. Not the task that made him look busiest. The task that produced the greatest result. He learned to say no. He learned to ignore work that only pleased other people but did not move him forward. From that point on, John stopped measuring a day by the number of hours worked. He measured it by the value created. At 35, John received a raise of $200 per month. He was excited. John calculated that if he saved the entire increase, he would have $2,400 after 1 year. That could become an emergency fund. It could be invested. It could prevent him from ever repeating the desperate phone calls he made at 28. But only a few months later, John realized the money had almost disappeared. A few more restaurant meals, a new subscription, a better pair of shoes, a phone upgrade earlier than necessary, a few small rewards because he believed he had worked hard. No single expense was large enough to shock him, but together, around $160 of the $200 raise vanished every month. Income increased. Spending increased with it. Life did not become meaningfully better. John was not healthier. He was not freer. He did not sleep better. Only his spending standards had risen. This is the trap known as lifestyle inflation. When income rises, very few people keep living the same way. They move into a larger house, buy a newer car, eat at more expensive places, add services they never needed before. In the end, a person earning $5,000 a month can feel just as financially trapped as someone earning $2,000. Because the issue is not only how much you earn, it is the gap between what you earn and what you are required to spend. If your spending rises every time your income rises, you are still running on a treadmill. It is just a more expensive treadmill. John began moving the raise into savings on the day he got paid. He stopped waiting to see what remained at the end of the month. Because he understood that when money sits in a spending account, the mind quickly invents reasons to use it. At 35, John also began learning to ignore other people's judgment. His family asked when he would buy a new car. Friends made jokes about his old phone. Some people said John was too cheap. Others said he did not know how to enjoy life. Years earlier, those comments would have bothered him. He would have wanted to prove them wrong. But then he realized the people judging his financial decisions would not pay his bills. They would not make his car payment. They would not pay his credit card debt. They would not support him if he lost his job. They would not help him sleep when his bank account was empty. So why should John destroy his future for a few seconds of approval from them? You do not need to look rich. You need to become free. Those are not the same thing. At 40, John went to the bank to handle a transaction. The employee opened his account on the computer. She looked at the screen and then suddenly looked up at him. Then she checked the number again. John was wearing an ordinary shirt. His shoes were several years old. Outside was the same paid-off pickup truck. No one looking at John on the street would have guessed how much he owned. And John liked it that way. He had started to understand quiet wealth. What people can see is often money that has already been spent. A luxury car is money that has left the account. An expensive watch is money turned into an object. A house beyond someone's means may represent 30 years of debt. Designer clothes are money that can no longer be invested. But the assets people cannot see may be the most valuable. An emergency fund, an investment account, a paid-off home, the ability to stop working for several months without panic, the freedom to leave a job that makes you miserable, the ability to help family during a crisis. Real wealth often has no logo. It makes no noise. It does not require approval from strangers. John watched new cars pass by and realized that many impressive possessions were simply borrowed from the future. People enjoyed them today, but their future selves had to keep working to pay for them. Every installment plan is a promise that you will sell your time in the future. You may still enjoy your work then, or you may not. But debt does not care whether you are tired or happy. The payment still comes due. John no longer wanted to impress strangers. He wanted to buy back his own time. At 47, John was working for a client who owned several rental properties. During the repairs, the client noticed that John could identify problems very quickly. He knew which houses had serious issues. He knew which repairs were minor. He understood the real cost of labor and materials. He recognized which types of damage could become enormous bills. And most importantly, John was not easily fooled by appearances. A freshly painted house was not automatically a good investment. An old, ugly house was not automatically a bad one. The client asked John, "Have you ever thought about investing in real estate?" John laughed. For years, he had believed investing was only for wealthy people. He assumed ordinary people were supposed to work until 65, then retire, receive enough money to survive, and live the rest of their lives cautiously. But for the first time, John realized that the skills he had built over many years could be converted into ownership. He did not have to use his knowledge only in exchange for wages. He could use it to recognize value other people missed. John agreed to join a small deal. He did not rush in with greed. He did not borrow more than he could manage. He did not believe promises of getting rich quickly. He studied every number. He prepared for bad outcomes. He invested only in what he understood. The first deal did not make John wealthy overnight, but it changed how he thought about money. Before that, John worked to earn money. Then he learned to use money to buy assets. And then he allowed those assets to create more money. John continued investing carefully. He bought properties he understood. He repaired problems he knew how to solve. He reinvested the income. And he allowed time to do the rest. There was never a single moment when John suddenly became rich overnight. No video captured him celebrating. There were no fireworks. There was no applause. John's wealth was built quietly, one decision at a time, one debt paid off at a time, one opportunity studied carefully, one unnecessary purchase rejected. That is how most lasting wealth is built. It is not exciting. It is not glamorous. But it works. Discipline does not always make you feel rich today. It makes you less afraid of tomorrow. John sat in his old pickup truck. He looked at the worn wallet in his hand. Then he unfolded the faded receipt. It was the same receipt he had written when he was 28. The day Owen gave him $1,400 to repair his car. John had repaid the money decades ago, but he still carried the paper. Not to remember the debt, but to remember the person who answered. Throughout his life, John had cared about many numbers: bank balances, credit scores, credit limits, salary, property values, investment returns. But once he reached a certain level of wealth, all those things slowly became numbers on a screen. A larger number could make life more comfortable, but it could not sit beside you in a hospital. It could not call and ask whether you were okay. It could not show up at 2 in the morning when your life was falling apart. It could not replace a real friend. John opened his phone and looked through his contacts. There were still many names, but only a few people he knew he could call at any hour, and that no longer made him sad. When we are young, we often want many people to know us. As we grow older, we only need a few people who truly understand us. When we are young, we measure success by what others can see. A new jacket, an expensive car, a large house, a photo with thousands of likes. But eventually, we understand that success is not about how many people think we are doing well. It is about whether we are truly free, whether we sleep peacefully, whether one unexpected bill can destroy us, whether we can say no to work that makes us miserable, whether we have time for the people who matter. And when life reaches its hardest moment, who will answer the phone? Maybe you do not have much money today. There is nothing shameful about that, but do not use your future income to buy approval in the present. Do not confuse a credit limit with wealth. Do not confuse busyness with effectiveness. Do not confuse hundreds of social connections with one real friend. Do not burn your life trying to impress people who do not truly care about you. And do not wait until 55 to understand that the most valuable thing in your wallet may not be money. It might be an old piece of paper, a photograph, a letter, a library card, or the memory of someone who stood beside you when the whole world turned away. Because in the end, success is not measured by the jacket you wear, not by the car you drive, not by how wealthy other people think you are, not by the number of likes beneath a photo. It is measured by this. When life pushes you into your darkest moment, who will answer when you call? If John's story made you think of someone who showed up when you needed them most, send this video to that person. And do not just send the video, tell them you still remember. Tell them what their help meant to you. Because some debts can be repaid with money. But some acts of kindness can never be fully repaid, no matter how long we live.